Okay, Chair, whenever you're ready.
Sounds good. Hi, everybody. It's been a while. I will call this meeting to order. And first, we shall do the land acknowledgement statement. So I will read that. The City of Albany recognizes that we occupied the land originally protected by the Confederated Villages of Least John. We acknowledge that genocide took place on these lands and must make strides to repay the moral debt that is owed to the indigenous people, specifically the Albany tribe. We thank them for their contributions, which have transformed our community and will continue to bring forth growth and unity. The City of Albany commits to sustaining ongoing relationships with the tribe and together build a better future for all that now make this their home. And with that, the roll call.
Member Chomsky.
Present.
Member Hoff. We'll come back to him. Member Schneider.
Present.
Member Thomas.
Present.
Member Hoff. Member Hoff. Oh, he's definitely present. Chair Bowman.
Present. All right. The first item on the agenda is approval of the May 19th minutes. Do I hear a motion to approve?
I move to approve.
I'll second.
All right. Member Chomsky.
Yes.
Member Hoff. Absent. Member Schneider.
Yes.
Member Thomas.
Yes.
Chair Bowman.
Yes.
Let's give it another try. Member Hoff, are you able to hear us? I don't know that he can hear us. Why don't you keep going and then I'll see if I can reach him.
Okay, the third item on the agenda is staff and committee member announcements. And I believe we have an announcement with the new appointee.
Yeah, please all welcome Member Thomas. If you probably want to introduce yourselves.
Sure, I can start the introductions. So hi, Member Thomas. My name's Kyle Bowman. I am originally from Columbus, Ohio, lived in New England, went to grad school at Berkeley, but have been a resident of the city of Albany in particular for about 2 years. And I've been on the Charter Review Committee since the beginning of this term. I work in the biotechnology space and happy to be here. I'll pass it to Member Schneider.
Hi, Lisa Schneider. I have lived in Albany for a long time, I think about 26 years. I grew up in the Seattle area and I came to California also for grad school and then law school. And I work in the insurance industry and I have been serving on the Charter Review Committee for quite a long time too. So it's good to see you.
I guess I'll go next. I'm Harry Chomsky. I grew up in Massachusetts and have lived in the Bay Area since about 1990 and in Albany since 2001. And I served on the what was then called the Traffic and Safety Commission, now the Transportation Commission, in the teens from 2014 to 2019. and I've been on the Charter Review Committee now for a couple of years. And I work as a software developer.
Nice to meet you.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure, I will. Joby Thomas. I have been living in Albany for almost 17 years. And prior to that, I lived in San Francisco for about 7 years. My wife and I moved out to the Bay Area for bigger and better things. And so she works in the biotech as well. Let me just plug in I lose power here. Sorry about that. Okay. So this is my first city government affiliated committee. So I'm excited about learning new things and becoming more involved with the community. I work in insurance industry as well as an operations manager, and work at State Comp Insurance Fund, which is workers' comp for hundreds of thousands of policyholders throughout the state of California. So look forward to meeting you guys in person someday.
It looks like Member Hoff is reconnecting. Member Hoff, can you hear us?
You're muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we were just doing introductions. Now that we have committee member Thomas on the phone, and I think the only one that we haven't introduced is yourself.
Oh.
So if you can hear us, I think it's just a brief introduction.
Oh, brief introduction myself. My name's Gregory Hoff. I'm holding this in my hand, so it's a lot. I live at 726 Key Route, just a half a block down from the high school. And I am a retired operations manager in the manufacturing industry. I joined this group because I've been a long-term, over 30-year resident of Albany, and I wanted to participate in the city function in some way, shape, or form. So here I am, and I've been on the committee just since around April. So I'm somewhat new. Nice to meet you. And you are Mr. Thomas? I can't hear.
Yes.
Now everybody else is muted for me.
Yeah.
Okay.
If you heard, or I'm also an operations manager. I'm still am. So been in Albany for 17, almost 18 years now. So I look forward to being part of this group. Thank you.
Okay.
All right, I think the first item or the next item on the agenda is public comment. Looks like we have members of the public in attendance. Do we have any public comment that or members that would wish to speak?
There's no hands raised.
Okay, next is presentations. I don't believe we have any presentations this evening. So I will move to the next item on the agenda, which is progress report on the work plan items. Again, as a reminder, we have 2 work plan items that we've been focused on exploring this session. One is lowering the voting age for citizens in the town of, or the city of Albany to vote in school board elections or for municipal elections to the age of 16. There was precedent in a few jurisdictions around the US, including voter authorization to do this in Berkeley and Oakland, but those have not been implemented. So that was the first issue. And then the second item was exploring whether or not we should increase or put on the ballot a measure to increase city council compensation from the current rate of $300 a month to a higher number. So the first one was lowering the voting age. I have an update here with regards to the progress in, I should actually say lack of progress in Berkeley and Oakland on this issue. But before I did that, I just wanted to open it up to any other committee member that had anything to report on this item.
On the voting age,
Yep, on the voting age.
not me.
Okay. So on the voting age, I know we have some new members here as well. I had previously shared some what I thought were compelling evidence as to why other jurisdictions around the US have made the decision to lower the voting age from 18 to 16 for, in some cases, municipal elections, but in Berkeley and Oakland, it was for the school board. A lot of the evidence pointed to increased civic engagement and developing habits that persist over the person's lifetime, with little risk or consequence of actually doing this, because most 16-year-olds, according to research, are at the same cognitive level of decision making as like an 18-year-old would be, and they have a stake in the elections that they're voting in. I've mentioned that Berkeley in 2016, voters passed an initiative on the ballot to allow 16-year-olds to vote in school board elections, and Oakland did the same in 2020. Both jurisdictions and the city of Albany all work with the Alameda County Registrar of Voters, and I've been in touch with a lawyer working with the city of Berkeley to actually pull this through and to put it into effect. And what they've found is they weren't going to use essentially the workaround, the software workaround that they plan to use for this upcoming election in November of 2022. So the registrar for the county has essentially thrown up its hands and said, we can't implement it this year. We're going to have to do a more extensive study around the software updates that would need to be made in order to pull this through and put it in place. And Albany would be reliant on the same software updates. So essentially, I don't think anything's going to happen in 2020. We're still waiting on understanding exactly what the cost would be to implement this. And I feel like that's a critical part of ultimately making a recommendation here as to what the cost would be to the city of Albany. So my recommendation here is to continue to wait till the two much larger jurisdictions worked through this, but they are aware that the city of Albany is interested in assessing this and potentially exploring putting it on the ballot, but I don't see the need to potentially like push it forward in the meantime. Any questions or comments on that information?
I just had a question. Was there any, are we able to do any sort of polling to see how much interest there is in Albany for this? Or is it just assumed that there is interest?
I don't know that we have thought about doing any polling in order to actually put it into effect. It would go to voters. I did speak to some members of the school board late last year that said they could reach out to the students in the school district to understand what sort of interest they had. I stopped follow up on that effort once I learned what was going on in Berkeley and Oakland, to really didn't see the need to continue to push on it in the meantime. But that I think that's something we could do. I don't know how we could do broader polling. Member Chomsky.
Thanks. So regarding costs, I just wanted to make kind of an observation that there may be three different kinds of costs that we can evaluate separately. One is the cost of updating the software, which presumably will already be done by the time Albany joins this effort. So it wouldn't necessarily incur a cost for Albany we could sort of ride on the coattails of whoever has paid for it before, whether that's the cities involved or the county or the company that that makes the software or whoever it is. A second cost would be any upfront cost that Albany has to incur in order to implement this for the first time. And then a third kind of cost is any ongoing cost that would recur with each election cycle that would just make running an election some fraction of more expensive than it is right now. So I'd want to make sure when we get to the point of being able to evaluate costs, I think it would be helpful to understand which bucket the different costs are in and present to voters that it's really the ongoing year by year costs that are going to have the most impact on the city. And if we can make sure that those are extremely low or zero, then I think we could make a good case that it's a low cost measure, even if there's a bit of upfront expense. So that was one thought. And the other thought I had is I wondered if we had ever discussed the idea of moving ahead with the ballot initiative now or as soon as possible. We can't get it on this election, but but moving ahead to set it up and just expect that if it passes, we would be in the same boat as those other cities, and we obviously wouldn't expect, we would make sure that the ballot initiative is written in a way that is perfectly fine if it takes another 2 years or 4 years or whatever it takes to get it implemented, what we're trying to do is to join what these other cities are doing and implement it when they do, not to try to push ahead of them. Is that an idea that we've ever considered or that people would like to consider?
There's an additional step here, which is providing the pros and cons of reducing the voting age to the city council. And then they would make the decision about whether to put it on the ballot. And I would expect they would be interested in the costs.
And is it the case that we can't really evaluate the costs until an election is run in Berkeley and Oakland until they actually get this worked out and implemented and they run the election, and then we can find out what the costs were, and then we can make a report to the city council? Or is there anything we can report to council sooner than that?
So I think we could definitely report I'll call them qualitative pros and cons without the costs. But what I've been struggling to nail down is exactly how this will actually be accomplished eventually. What I was told for this year is they were working on, I'm just looking at my notes here, like a workaround that would have worked for 2020, and they spent, or 2022, lost track of time here. They spent months working on that, and then eventually I was told this summer the registrar just threw up their hands and essentially said they weren't going to be able to implement it this year because they didn't have functionality to deal with like lost ballots and different ballots, where one ballot for those 18 and up is different than those 16 and up that essentially caused problems where they couldn't do it in 2022. So they're like back to the drawing board looking at solutions, some of which could actually be a software update and some of which could actually be some sort of manual intervention, which could change the cost dynamic. But I think as at the end of this year, we are supposed to provide an update on our work plan items. And to your point, we could list out the pros and cons outside of the costs and basically state the status of what's going on.
So there's
in
the
Berkeley
pros,
and Oakland.
the pros, the cons, and the unknowns.
Yeah, the unknown of what's next to actually implement this and what the potential options are. But from my understanding, they haven't determined how they're going to do it. And it's already been, 6 years since Berkeley voters approved this?
So it's operational complexities in addition to the cost of the.
Yeah. There's also, I was alerted to by the lawyer working on with the Berkeley City Council, there was something similar that San Francisco voters allowed non-citizens to vote in municipal elections, or at least school board elections in the city of San Francisco. And that was challenged, to my understanding, by a conservative group, and a judge actually declared it to be unconstitutional in July. And that ruling has since been stayed pending an appeal. So that is, just to put it on your radar, also happening at the same time. I know it's not completely analogous because we're talking about non-citizens in one case and 16-year-olds in another, but it's kind of the backdrop in terms of what she thought was relevant to what the city of Albany is exploring, and I think would be pertinent to also bring up and follow in what we share with the city council.
Yeah. Just to clarify, I think the issue of it being unconstitutional was related to the California state constitution, not the national constitution of the United States. Your point stands. I just wanted to
the legal
that detail.
dispute involves a provision of the state constitution that declares a United States citizen 18 years of age and resident in the state may vote. So I think the question came down to, can a charter city allow in its own election something that differs from the state constitution? That's my understanding.
It's clear that a city couldn't restrict voting, the Constitution says those people may vote, and a city can't say, well, you can't vote because you have blonde hair or something. That would clearly be unconstitutional.
Yeah.
The question is, if a city wants to expand and say additional people besides those who the Constitution says may vote also may vote, is that permitted by the Constitution? And I find it odd that a judge interpreted those words to mean that it's not permitted, but nonetheless, that's what a judge said. So
yeah, it says the judge agreed that the Constitution of the state allowed only citizens to vote, and in that same verbiage in the Constitution, it says 18-year-olds, and that voting eligibility is a statewide issue beyond the power of cities, even self-governing charter cities. So that's something that I think that we should raise to the city council, that this is being litigated itself.
So this lawsuit doesn't involve the issue of age, but it seems like the same principle that the judge is applying could equally well be applied to say no city can allow people under 18 to vote, because of that same clause in the Constitution and the same interpretation of its grammar, right?
Yeah, that's my understanding. Although the attorney working with Berkeley hasn't mentioned any suits with Berkeley or Oakland.
But it's not hard to imagine the same group that filed that original suit then following up with a suit about youth voting. Or
My perspective would be that youth voting would not be quite as politically charged as the other situation. And there's always there, but as you say, there's a chance of litigation. I think the chance of litigation would be minimal. But again, you never know. There's a lot of different people out there.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's just a matter of some sort of precedent being set, so something to keep an eye on.
I had a question. I apologize if this was in the material, but is there a one-time like operational cost and then a per 16 and 17-year-old cost every year, probably like sending out ballots and things like that? So there's a per year cost and probably a one-time initial setup cost.
From my understanding, it's and I appreciate how Member Chomsky broke this out earlier, but there could be a software cost, like a one-time software cost, and then there might be recurring costs related to like labor potentially involved in managing what is essentially another form of ballot that exists in each election. So that could be like the recurring cost.
so it's not just the number of ballots that have to be sent out, but it's that there are more different kinds of ballot.
It creates complexity.
Because there's some ballots that have only the municipal candidates that are open to 16 to 17-year-olds, and there are other ballots that have all of that plus the statewide and national stuff.
Right.
So there are already a lot of different kinds of ballots depending what party you belong to and where you live and all of that, but this just increases the number of different ballot configurations that the registrar has to support.
It seems to be more complex than I ever could have imagined it might be. And the city of San Francisco has done this. Unfortunately, they use a different technology vendor to run their elections than Alameda.
So can I ask one of you to follow up about this idea that we report to the city council? Because one of my concerns tonight was that we've been discussing this for a while and we haven't sent any feedback to the council yet. And I just wanted to understand what is our schedule for doing that and what kind of feedback are we expected to send when?
So I'll defer that question back to John and Ann. I know we had some back and forth as to when our report to the city council is expected at the end of the year, and in what form.
I think Ant's got the best perspective on this.
It is noted in the work plan that a review of the items on the work plan should be reviewed. Or the items on the work plan should be reviewed. Sorry about that. I know that there's some talk about advisory should report status, but I don't have anything definite from the council yet. But anytime when the work plan item is worked on and when it's ready to present to council, it can definitely be written up in a memo format, including the background, the discussion, the pro and con, the financial impact, other impacts, or any of the additional supporting documents. And basically, the advisory body would turn that over to the staff liaison. The staff liaison will work with, we will work to get that onto the city council agenda, when feasible.
And is that supposed to be synchronized with the end of the year and the end of our term as committee members, or can it be any time?
Well, when there's an item ready to present, it could be any time. And then in addition to that, the work plan states, sorry, I'm bringing that up right now. Advisory bodies shall review their work plan at the end of the 2-year term, November, December, even calendar year, and create a status report of their work, including what was completed, what should continue, and what should be dropped. An optional narrative can explain decisions made regarding individual items. This summary document will assist the bodies newly appointed at the beginning of the odd calendar year understand their role and enable them to develop their own plan going forward.
So that report the intention of it is not so much to report to the city council, it's more to report to next year's charter review committee.
Yeah, that one is more of a status report.
Continuity.
But like as I mentioned, if there is an item that is completed and there's a recommendation ready to go to council, that report can be anytime.
If this is not completed, but is there any provision for us to provide an interim report to council saying we don't have a recommendation yet and this is why? But here are what we said, the pros and cons and unknowns. At the moment, we feel the unknowns are dominating the discussion and we don't feel comfortable making a recommendation, but council can choose to have us keep working on it, or council can choose to cancel it or move ahead with it at their discretion, like that.
Yes, that's definitely could be a report too. It could be, even if it's not this voting age item, say if it's like a really simple item that takes action, but maybe after you review it, you don't think that is the right thing for a city to proceed with, you would still recommend to the city council, say, this is not something that we would recommend, or this is not the right time for the project.
Yeah, I guess in this case, what I would most like, if it's feasible, is to say, let's keep this on our work plan and keep revisiting it, but we're not advising the council to take action on it now, but we want to provide the report because we've kind of done the research that we can do. And all that needs to be done now is wait and see what the costs turn out to be.
Yeah, I'm of the perspective that we should provide an update on the qualitative pros and cons and say there's kind of like two things: the litigation that's pending and the operational implementation, and thus the costs that are pending. There's no deadline right now that we need to get this on the ballot, so I don't feel the pressure to make a recommendation until we have more information on those two items. But I like the idea of providing the interim report, as you called it, to city council in the meantime.
So Anne, is that kind of interim report feasible, or?
Yes.
And do we as a committee feel that the information we've collected so far is the right body of information for that report, rather than waiting till November and see if anybody finds out anything more?
I'm not going to answer that question directly, but I do want to raise the issue of, is there a real appetite in the community for this, a desire for it? And I understood the strategy from a number of meetings ago was to gather a little more information about costs and feasibility, and then reach out to, PTA, school board, other stakeholders to get a sense of whether there's a real call for this in the community. So I think that's another missing piece of information.
Yeah, so that would have to go under the unknowns.
I think that's a totally reasonable part that we should potentially include here. I can reach back out to the school board to see if they want to engage their student member of the school board and students within this district to see if there is appetite and enthusiasm for this, and we could include that in the report in November, or also identify it as an outstanding item.
Well, I think as Member Schneider pointed out, it's a little hard to ask someone for their opinion on whether they support this when we can't say how much it costs.
Mhm.
So I
Yeah.
think we could get we could do more meaningful outreach and get more convincing answers from people to gauge the appetite once the costs are known, which is why I suggested putting that under the unknowns section of the report instead of trying to do that outreach now and get what information we can. So I guess
Is there
I'm gently proposing that we go ahead with a report based on the information we've gathered so far.
My question is, what is the advantage of doing such a report and presenting it to the council versus doing an internal status report that would collect, all of the good research that has been done so far, so that it doesn't get lost, so that the charter committee can continue to work on it,
Yeah.
or resume working on it? Because if there was a decision we wanted the city council to make, that would be a reason for providing a report, even an incomplete one. I'm not sure that there is a decision that we're asking for. Maybe there are some other reasons to present this to the city council versus keeping it an internal status report. But I think that's something to consider.
Is there an expectation by the city council that there is some sort of report by the end of the year? Or is that not necessary, a progress report, so to speak? I don't know.
And you have your hand up.
Yes, so according to the work plan, it sounds more like what Member Schneider says, like an internal status report for the next group of Charter Review Committee members. However, if you guys have noticed the next City Council agenda, there's an item on the agenda, advisory body status reports. I have not seen the actual memo from the council member yet, but I know that memo is coming. It's forthcoming, and I don't know what is. I don't know what they have for council to consider, whether it will be approved by the council, or if it would. I don't know if it would be approved by the rest of the council that to require a status report from all of the advisory body, but the item is up on the agenda for the council's consideration. Just thought I mentioned that as a heads up.
But if the council did take action on that, it would be our job to respond to that at our November meeting, right?
Correct.
It's not something that we need to take action on today. So I think we're all in agreement that there, and by regulation, there will be an end of year report that we put together for internal use by the next round of the charter committee. The question is whether we should take further initiative now to send an interim report to council. And I'm feeling tentatively like that would be a nice idea, but I'm not sure if the committee as a whole is in favor of that. So I haven't really heard any support from other committee members. So unless I hear that, I'll let it drop.
Yeah, my perspective is if we're already completing a report for the next committee, then we could leverage that same report if it's required to report back to the city council if that measure is adopted, but also discuss among ourselves. I'd be supportive of providing an interim status update back to the city council for the simple reason of allowing them to determine if the next charter review committee should continue to take up and work on this topic. Because that is eventually approved by the city council.
It's going to be a different council
You're right.
that makes that decision, right?
You're right.
A somewhat different council, at least.
So I guess then that's a good point. Maybe we prepare the report for the next charter review committee and leave it to them as to how they share that information with the next city council.
That seems like a judicious thing to do. Excuse me, go ahead.
Agreed. Because, part of any committee's presentation of their work plan for approval is to justify it. So it will be up to, the upcoming charter committee if they decide they want to go forward with that to justify it.
Question for the clerks is, we're actually pulling together this report. Are there any regulations or rules that we need to abide by in terms of how we're pulling it together? Like if we start a shared Google document or something like that, will that be acceptable to work on outside of these sessions?
No, it will not be. You can't share, or at least not more than a majority of you should share that same document. If you want to have, well, that leaves one person out, but you could have two people and two people work together separately, or you guys can work on it individually. And
I guess, and what form do these reports typically take that enable collaboration, or is it typically one or two people putting it together and then submitting it to the others for approval?
It could take whichever form you like, one of the two form that you like. You can work on it and then discuss it together, and then designate one member or two member to formalize the memo, or to finalize the memo, I'm sorry, and submit that. Or if you all come up with your idea and we work on it at the next meeting right here, we put up a memo right on the screen, and type as the meeting goes. That might take a little longer meeting than usual, though.
Okay. Well, I'm happy to spearhead a draft. If I welcome anyone else to collaborate with me, I guess one other person could collaborate with me if there's a volunteer, and then I can share that at the next meeting that we have live, and we can make any updates in that session
Or changes.
Can that draft be sent out by the clerks beforehand? I guess it would be, right? Part of the package.
I believe it can be.
It won't be too beforehand. It would be when the agenda goes out.
Okay.
So basically, anything that is shared with a majority of the members has to be shared with the members of the public at the same time. Nothing behind closed doors, if it's a majority.
So is there one other member who would like to work with Kyle on on the draft? I could volunteer to do that if no one else wants to.
Thank you.
Okay,
Welcome the help.
I
Should we-
hereby volunteer to work with with Kyle as a subcommittee between now and the November meeting.
Sounds good. I'm going to move us on, if there's no other comments on this issue, to the other item on the agenda, which is the city council compensation. Again, this was a discussion about whether or not we should raise the city council compensation from $300 a month per member to a higher rate that's been in place for some time. We, speared by member Schneider, did some benchmarking to similar sized cities. If I summarize that, I'd say on the actual compensation perspective, which is the piece that we were looking at, Albany tended to be on the lower side, but not the lowest. When you included health and benefits, which were outside of our purview, Albany was in line with many of the other cities that we looked at.
Actually, for total compensation based on the 2020 figures, Albany was a bit higher than similarly sized cities by about $2,000. But if you were looking just at the base pay alone, it was lower.
And
I imagine. Mhm.
And we determined that the benefits were outside of our purview, I believe.
We do not have authority over the benefits because that's not part of the charter.
But on the other hand,
The concept. Go ahead, please.
we were encouraged to consider the benefits as part of the package for evaluating what the wage should be. Like we weren't supposed to make a recommendation about changing the benefits, but we could take the existing benefits into account as we considered what we would recommend doing about the wage. Is that correct?
That was what I heard from staff last time.
Yeah.
Also, I wanted to clarify something. This particular work item issue is, there's one more piece to it. It's not just whether or not the pay should be adjusted. It's whether the pay should be adjusted in an attempt to encourage more diverse candidates to run.
Yeah, that's my recollection of the genesis of the idea.
Yes. Thanks for
Yes.
bringing that up. That was something at the end of our last meeting in May. We resolved to try to understand if there were secondary research studies that existed that actually spoke to that point and showed that if you increase city council compensation, that actually does increase diversity on city councils. So with that, I was next going to ask the group here if anyone had anything to share on that topic.
I really don't. I Googled away and I could find nothing new to add to what I spoke to in our last meeting. And I'm not seeing information that indicates increasing city council pay will overcome whatever impediment it is that is keeping more diverse candidates from running in Albany. And then we did also talk about Albany's specific historical pattern where candidates tend, or winning candidates, but I think candidates generally tend to come from the census tracts within Albany that are more affluent. And so one of the issues was, if we just increase the pay, will we just be giving more money to the same candidates,
No.
types of candidates who have been running in the past?
And my recollection is we also discussed, I don't know if this was our purview or not, but district elections as opposed to at-large elections, was that all part of the same discussion? Or is that not part of our purview?
It's not part of our purview, but it's something that is being discussed in the community because of an ongoing dispute about it.
Yeah.
Is that right, Anne?
It's not part of the discussion.
Yeah.
I mean, part of the what triggered this council compensation stuff.
Okay.
So it sounds like none of the continuing committee members have any more information about this than we did last time. I would like to encourage our new member to not expecting that you would have done this research, but are you interested in making your own attempt at doing this research and trying to find out if raising council pay can increase diversity? Is that something you'd like to take a stab at between now and the next meeting, before we simply say, well, we tried and we couldn't find anything?
Yeah, I can do that. And again, I haven't had a chance to review all the prior materials and things, but is there a block of content that I could be sent or directed to at least see what history we have that the other members of the team have found or not found? I know may not be specific research on it, but I mean, there's a root cause, or at least there's a reason why people aren't even considering it.
Member Thomas, everything that the committee shared is either during the meeting, so it'd be recorded on the video, or it's attached to the prior agenda, and you can see the prior agenda on the city website, including the video, the same place that you found tonight's meeting's agenda.
Okay.
I think the most pertinent item may be what you shared, Member Schneider, around comparable cities, and I think it had the mean and the median pay and income. I want to say that was the March meeting. Not pay and income, but compensation and benefits.
Yeah, I got a data set of all city council pay for California cities in 2020 and did some crunching and analysis and summary.
And do you remember exactly which, was it March 2022 that you presented that to the committee?
I don't remember, but there would have been an attachment.
Yeah, I want to say it was March or January.
Okay.
It should be in it. I don't know if it's still in Excel or as a PDF, but
So
I would say that is in the last meeting that we held was also, I think, pertinent.
yeah,
So
I think
if there's a video you want to watch, that would be the one.
I think at the meeting in May was our last meeting, I believe.
The January meeting had the attachments.
Okay, that's good to know. Yeah, I actually watched the video of the May meeting, and I don't think there was any substantive information that we discussed at that meeting. I think we just considered these qualitative questions, kind of the same ones that we just summarized in the last 10 minutes. So
Was
I don't-
that, wasn't that, not to querulous or anything, but wasn't that the meeting where we discussed the census tract history?
yeah, but I think
Yeah.
there wasn't like research material presented there. I think it was just a discussion,
There were no attachments.
no attachments and nothing like I'm trying to figure out if we want to give Member Thomas advice on how to spend his time and which videos to actually watch, which takes a little while to do even at higher speed. I think maybe that January one would be the highest priority because that's where Member Schneider really did like put up a screen share and show some documents.
For benchmarking.
For comparing Albany's pay to other cities. But regarding the question of does council pay correlate with council diversity, I don't think we've ever had a meeting where anybody was able to present any research results about that. I think all we've done is pose the question and say that we don't know.
So I can speak a little bit to this, which is to say I found one publication by a professor at the law professor at the University of Houston. It was published in a Stanford Journal of Law. And she cited several qualitative statements suggesting city council compensation increases promote diversity among elected officials because pay can be a significant barrier to public service. Also, that minorities and women, according to the Federal Reserve, have lower levels of wealth and are less likely to have other sources of income to support themselves. So that could help representation among those groups. What's that?
Excuse me. Do you have a citation to?
Yeah, I can share the citation. I'll share the report. And then also, I know this wasn't our intended goal, but the other citation that I saw was it encourages people with higher educational attainment to run if there's higher salaries or higher compensation related to the job. That doesn't necessarily accomplish the goal of increasing diversity, but potentially more qualified candidates. That being said, I didn't see any empirical studies, quantitative studies that backed any of these qualitative claims. So I reached out to the author. She responded to me and said, this article was published 5 years ago. In her research, she also did not find any empirical data supporting this. And she's asked the law librarians at the university to see if there has been anything new published because she's still interested. So all I have is these qualitative statements. They sound good in theory, but I don't know, especially when we're talking about Albany, what a nominal increase, what effect that is going to have moving from $300 a month to $400 a month and not something dramatic. Like there's, I think San Antonio was referenced in her research where they moved from a small stipend to a salary of like $50,000, and that actually went into effect. I don't know that they actually have empirical evidence that did anything. So that's the information that I found. I can't say it's exactly what we were looking for in terms of empirical data. It's mostly these qualitative statements, but I can share the report.
Thank you.
Thanks for digging that up. So, Member Thomas, are you interested in revisiting this discussion in November?
That is actually of interest because as I was doing some background, I was reading the charter, I was reading the code and laws that were passed. The firearms one was a really interesting read. the emergency firearms passed in May 2022. Aside from that, I was actually surprised by the salary, and I can't imagine civil service. I'm a civil servant in my current profession for the state of California, and I know comparatively, salaries are very lower, much lower than my peers in the private sector. So, but I'm able to live comfortably because it's salary, but I can't imagine volunteering for just as hard of a job as a city council member, if in fact it takes a full-time effort, and to be able to live off of $300, you would have competing priorities in your life. Aside from just your life, you have work, city council, and life to compete with, whereas the rest of us just have life and work, right? So how do you bring people into that? That's a really challenge with $300.
Yeah, I don't think anybody is arguing that being on the city council is the equivalent of a full-time job amount of workload, but it's substantial, and it's enough that if people have a choice of either working full-time or working part-time and serving on the council, it might be hard for some people to elect the part-time plus council option if the council pay doesn't make up for what they're losing in their regular job. I think that's the line of thinking that we've been going with, and it would be wonderful if you would see what you can learn about this, and we can visit it one more time in November.
Okay, I'll do that. Thank you for the challenge.
And I'll share the research that I came across, which is both that publication with the citations and the same law professor worked with a smaller city in Oregon, where a similar body to us came up with a recommendation to the council to, I believe, increase the stipend for that city, and I think tie it to inflation. That's the piece I go back to, is I don't think we're exploring making this a salaried position, but is the monthly rate high enough that it's incentivizing someone who's sacrificing hours of their time and doing the cost benefit analysis of those hours could be spent at a job, perhaps an hourly waged job. And it makes more sense to do that job than it does to run for city council because of the $300 stipend is what it is.
So what's a mechanism for Member Bowman to share that link with us? Are you able to just read it to us now so that we can hear it and the general public can hear it? Or is there a way, Anne, that Kyle can put it up on his screen to share with us and the community right now?
Yeah, he can share his screen if he like.
Or would it be possible for him to give us the citation? You said it was in the Stanford Law Journal, like the date.
Yeah, maybe I could just put the link in the chat. Would that work?
There's no chat here, so
Oh,
or
there
you
is
can
no
send me
chat.
the link to me by email, and then I can put it up.
Okay, perfect. Let's do that. I'll send you the link to the journal and the recommendation of the advisory body, and it's Milwaukee, Oregon is the city.
So you're sending that right now, and we'll be
I'll
able
send
to,
it after the meeting.
but then we don't have a way to get it. Is that right?
I thought Anne could send it to the group or post it.
I will have to post it if you're
Okay.
sending after the meeting.
What does it mean to post it?
How do you
Post it
find?
with the agenda. So yeah, if you go to the agenda.
Can you post that to this month's agenda, or does it have to wait
Yes.
for
No,
November?
no. I will post to this month agenda under
Okay.
the item that we're currently on, 6-1.
Okay, so Member Thomas can go in a day or two. Member Thomas can go to the agenda for this meeting that we're in the middle of right now and find the attachment, which is not there now, but will be there soon. Is that right?
Correct.
Great.
Okay, any other commentary on this particular issue?
We haven't made a formal call for public comment on either of these topics. Do you want to?
Sure, I can make the call for public comment. Is there any member of the public that wishes to speak? If so, raise your hand.
Looks like no hands raised.
Okay, any other comments on the city council compensation item? All right, otherwise, we'll move to future agenda items. Are there any requests for future items on the agenda? I have two, which would be reviewing the document, reviewing the memo on the voting age, and basically the interim report, as well as the second item that I would recommend would be reactions to the information shared regarding city council compensation, and for Member Thomas to add any new information found.
Or any other members to do so.
Anything else? All right. With that, our next meeting is November 17th at 7 p.m. And if there's no other announcements or commentary, I think we can go ahead and adjourn.